Alright guys, well welcome to the video. No, you didn't click on the wrong thing. This is No Time Close FPV channel. Look, I'll show you. So we'll get to why I'm sitting in a video game in a second. But obviously from the title you can tell this video is going to be about remote ID. Now there's been a lot of people covering remote ID in the last little while. I highly recommend you go check out Bruce at XChat. He's got some good videos detailing some information he found just on a publicly available FAA video talking about what remote ID is going to look like. To sum it up, or to get the gist of it, it turns out remote ID is probably going to be a lot worse than I think what a lot of us envisioned. For one thing, the amount of data available to members of the public is a lot higher. I think myself and many others probably thought that remote ID was mostly going to be about law enforcement having access to it, but it turns out the general public, your average Karen, will be able to see via remote ID your aircraft, even details about you, which I don't think is obviously a really good thing. Second part is that there's been some companies that have been awarded contracts for surveillance and logging. Basically, they're going to set up remote ID receivers. It's not exactly clear how widespread that's going to be, but those remote ID receivers are going to log and store historical data, which is going to let anybody look up, if you've been picked up by one of those receivers, going to be able to look at anybody with, I guess, authority to do so, to look up the history of your flights and any details that are pertinent to that. So a lot more invasive than I think many of us thought. Certainly some significant privacy concerns as far as I'm concerned. And honestly, it's just a pretty negative thing. It's obviously that the hobby itself is under attack. The entire hobby, of course, but in the area we're mostly concerned about is FPV flying. The AMA guys, they're going to have their FRIA zones. They're going to keep flying in their clubs. The DJI drone people, they don't know the rules anyway, so they're just going to do whatever they feel like doing. But those of us that actually know the rules, know what we're doing, we're facing just a further increase in regulations and limitations in terms of what's going on. And this is spreading wider and wider. Australia is talking about remote ID. Canada is talking about remote ID. And they're all looking for and talking about network remote ID. Right now what the FAA has is what's called broadcast remote ID, and that's where the drone just sends out its information. But network remote ID, which is what the FAA's original proposal was for, involved a cellular modem on the drone, which would actually report its location, not just if it was in range or if someone could see it, report its location at all times. And on top of that, the drone was not going to allow you to take off. Under the rules, the drone was not going to allow you to take off if it did not have that cellular connection, unless you had this special broadcast variety, which wasn't just going to be something any of us could do. That was going to be for your larger autonomous drones, more of a certified thing. So the FAA had to back off and go to broadcast-only remote ID, but that was something that they did almost as, I think, the result of a limitation of technology. So they're all just waiting for there to be a suitable technological jump, I guess you'd call it, till they could bring network remote ID back in. And when they do that, and assuming they follow the FAA's original roadmap, you're looking at the end of open source flight controllers, the end of really DIY in general, I think, and definitely going to have a chilling effect on the hobby. And that regulation is stepping on the toes of everybody who's trying to fly no matter what. In the US, the AMA group, they've got their area relatively protected, but you never know. Here in Canada, MAC, the Model Aviation Association of Canada, AMA's counterpart here, just had their exemption pulled by Transport Canada a few months ago. And now it's shut down a bunch of MAC fields because they no longer can be inside the controlled airspace boundary that they existed in for some of them for decades. The pilots aren't allowed to fly under the MAC rules. They have to fly under the Transport Canada rules, which are extremely painful and invasive for private operators. We're talking about a license that is far more difficult to do than the FAA version, registering every single plane that you own, having to do a site survey every time you go fly, having to do an incident report every time you crash, a pilot log, a flight log, the maintenance records you have to keep. I mean, we're talking about foam airplanes that you put together with glue, and they're talking about maintenance records and serial numbers. There's no connection between the two. The rules were set up for a DJI type operator who isn't going to crash normally in the normal pattern of their flying, whereas we're flying airplanes assembled with hot glue and flying through little gaps in the trees. Like there's those two worlds don't meet, and yet they're being regulated underneath the same roof. So all of that's to say is that the hobby is under attack, and I don't know what exactly is going to happen here. The more cynical people feel like it, we're just basically in the way of commercial operators, your Amazons that want to deliver packages and stuff like that, and these autonomous drones that are being zipping around the city. Well, it doesn't really work if there's non-autonomous drones that won't move out of the way. And so I think a lot of us feel that we're being pushed away. We're being, okay, let's get you out of here. You don't make any money. This is just a hobby for you. You just get you out of the way so that we can get this commercial stuff going. And I don't know if that's the main crux of what's going on, or if it's just the natural tendency of regulatory bodies to over-regulate and overstep their bounds. But the unfortunate thing is that in many places, the regulations are making it painful to actually go out and have fun with small foam airplanes or whatever. And they're being regulated far, far beyond the actual safety risk that they present to the public. And that's just really unfortunate. There are some people that are fighting back. Obviously, if you've been paying attention, you've seen things like the Race Day Quads lawsuit, which unfortunately lost. They were trying to stop remote ID. Recent effort I heard about was Flight Test and the FPV Freedom Coalition, who were attempting to make some movements in Congress, and they were encouraging people to write to the representatives. I think that's actually probably one of the best ways to go, because you can't really appeal to groups like the FAA, Transport Canada, etc. They don't really care. They're just there to write the rules and whatever. So they need boundaries above them that basically set in place what they are or should be allowed to do. But as far as I know, none of those current things have been successful, or maybe even really shown any chance of being successful. Obviously, the lawsuit failed. And if something doesn't give, if something doesn't change, I don't know what the future of the hobby is going to be. Which brings me back to why I'm sitting in a video game right now. And what I guess I feel is, what's the effect of all this remote ID rules going to be? So last year I got my first VR headset, and obviously it was a lot of fun. Apparently I like sitting around with something strapped to my face, because both my hobbies seem to incorporate that. And I started getting back into flight simulators, something I did when I was younger, and it was actually what led me into my career in aviation. And it got you exposed to everything aviation related, and it was a lot of fun. But playing on a flat monitor, you're playing a game, right? You're playing a whatever. But you strap the VR headset on, and suddenly it starts to actually feel like you are sitting in an airplane. You're not just staring at a flat screen. And so it's really rekindled my interest in the whole flight simulator, combat flight simulator genre of games. And I've been having a lot of fun with it. Now, that's not a bad thing. But, like I said, in Canada here, with the loss of the MAC exemption, now all FPV pilots have to follow all the rules to be legal. And the Canadian rules, which I touched on just part of them, are incredibly overzealous, and make it so that you just having to think about going flying goes, oh my goodness, like, what do I all have to do to make sure my butt is covered so that I won't get in trouble? And you know, you sit there and go, okay, well, is it worth it for a day where it's a little windy and blustery and whatever, or do I just go hop in the flight simulator, something where I don't have to charge batteries, I don't have to, prep all my stuff. I don't have to make sure everything's ready. I don't have to pack up the truck, drive it all out. And it's finally like, well, it's a lot simpler just to sit down in the flight simulator, put the VR helmet on, and now I'm sitting in an airplane. And, I can do a lot of the same things I do in FPV. I can go find obstacles to fly around. I can do a lot of things that I can't do in FPV, like, perform combat maneuvers and fire weapons and stuff like that. And so when the regulation is so high and the burden to actually do your hobby is so high, people will tend to burn out. The people will tend to shift to maybe something else. And eventually what happens is the hobby begins to die off. And that's what I feel is going to be happening because of all these over-regulation like remote ID. And a lot of people sit there, and I've seen a lot of people online say, well, I'm just not going to follow the rules. I'll just do whatever I want. And that's great and all, and I'm not going to tell anybody to go do that. But I do agree that chances of being caught or whatever, probably not all that high. At the same time, it's still, you don't have the stress of following all the rules, but now you have the stress of that you might get caught and you might get made an example of. And we have seen guys posting videos to YouTube and stuff like that have been caught under pre-existing rules and gotten slapped for it. And even beyond that, it really does reduce the amount of places that you can safely fly and operate in. And so, especially without the realistic chance of getting harassed. And now with this remote ID thing, where the public can sit there and look up if that airplane is following the rules. You're going to get a Karen, you're going to get a guy who cares about this, who's going to see that and decide that, or notice that airplane doesn't have remote ID, and increase the chance of him doing something like calling the police or whatever. So regardless of whether you follow the rules or don't follow the rules, the level of stress, the burden to do the hobby has increased. And thus, people are going to choose to maybe do something else, like sit in a video game here instead of going into the hobby. And less people that are into the hobby, less people that are being active in it. It just leads to lack of innovation, lack of companies willing to make products for it, etc., etc. And over time, instead of the hobby growing, the hobby begins to decrease, and over time that does spell the end of it. So anyway, I'm trying not to be too much of a downer about it. Obviously, I still really love flying FPV. I'm not planning to stop anytime soon. I'll do what I can to work within the bounds of the rules. Thankfully, sub 250 grams seems to be relatively untouched. Both in Canada and the US, it's better if you can fly sub 250. And so I'll hopefully be trying to keep doing that. But of course, there's very few airplanes that are sub 250. Nano Goblin being one of the only ones that is reasonably easy to keep sub 250 grams. So, anyway, that's kind of the rant I've got. Certainly not giving up. Certainly not, not going to stop flying FPV. But I'm not going to lie to you. There is going to be days when, it's not some perfect, calm, nice day out there. And I'm going to kind of go, well, if I don't have something prearranged with somebody like Romulus or whatever, like why would I go through all the effort of going out there and flying when I can just play a game inside and I don't have to worry about that. Like I said, not that I am going to stop flying FPV. I still love that. Still something different about it than sitting in a VR environment even. But there'll probably be a few more days now, and I can already tell you in the last few months that there have been days when I would have gone out, probably flown FPV, where I've stayed inside and played VR instead. So anyway, that's kind of my rant. If you feel the same, feel differently, whatever, just write it out in the comments. Be interesting to see what people think. Time's only going to tell. September is going to hit. Remote ID is going to come through. I don't know whether we're going to see things really change or not. I guess we'll find out when that happens. I know there's a lot of people talking about non-compliance, whether there's enough people who aren't going to comply to even be noticeable. Obviously, all DJI type drones are automatically complying because they're built in. They come built in with remote ID. Even the Avata and stuff like that are all built in with remote ID. So, whether our niche of the hobby is enough to even be noticeable, I don't know. Guess we'll find out. Anyway, if you happen to like VR video games and you have ever played this game I'm playing is called VTOL VR. Excellent video game for VR. You do need to have a PC to run it. Even if you've got something like the Oculus, it needs the power of a PC to actually run. But if you've got a halfway decent PC and a VR headset, chances are you can play this game. If you're ever interested, you can always hit me up. And one of the cool things about VR games versus, let's say, FPV, as you guys know, I love meeting up in person with people in the community, and I've got some friends that would love to fly FPV. But one of the neat things about a game like this is you don't have to travel to that person. You don't have to be in that same person's area. You can be playing together from the other end of the earth and being able to enjoy something together. So it's one of the only, or I shouldn't say it's only good thing, but it's one of the good things about a VR game over something like FPV. So anyway, you can always hit me up with that. So anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed the video. I just feel like the more we can put it out there, the more that we can get exposed to it, maybe the better off that we'll be. Maybe it won't make any difference. Who knows? But all we can do is, I guess, is hope and do what you can to keep flying, basically. So anyway, see you guys later.